When Fred Rogers came out of retirement to create a public service announcement in the wake of 9/11, he was hesitant. Recounting this moment, his producer remembers Rogers saying, "I just don't know what good these are going to do." Nonetheless, he recorded the video saying, "No matter what our particular job, especially in our world today, we are called to be Tikkun Olam, repairers of creation. Thank you for whatever you do, wherever you are, to bring joy and light and hope and faith and pardon and love to your neighborhood and to yourself." By invoking the Jewish concept of Tikkun Olam, Rogers called us all to the work of world repair. Over the last 50 or 60 years, the phrase Tikkun Olam has become more widely used. As Mount Holyoke Professor Emeritus Lawrence Fine wrote in 2018, the phrase Tikkun Olam, as it has been used especially by American Jews who identify as socially and politically progressive, expresses the conviction that the world is in urgent need of being set right. I don't think any of us question that something is not right with the world, but do we believe that anything can be done to set it right? Or have we lost faith in the possibility that we have any role to play? Within American Judaism, there are debates around the idea of Tikkun Olam. Firstly, there are some who dismiss the idea as not central to historic Judaism, but a more recent invention. Indeed, the meaning of the phrase has been used in many different ways over the centuries, within the Mishnah and Talmud of the classical rabbinical tradition, within the 14th century Hebrew Alenu prayer that calls for spiritual repair, and within the mystical Kabbalistic community through the teaching of Isaac Luria, a 16th century teacher. Clearly, the phrase has long been part of the Jewish tradition. In the book, The Way into Tikkun Olam, by Jewish scholar Rabbi Elliot Dorff, he tells the story of being on a panel with, quote, "a very learned Jew who claimed that the term Tikkun Olam, as currently used, is not a Jewish concept, but rather one used by those who want to abandon traditional Judaism and remake Judaism into a religion of social action." In response, Dorff acknowledges that while the current meaning of the phrase may only be 5 or 6 decades old, the ideas conveyed in the current meaning have been deeply central to the Jewish tradition for millennia. To illustrate this point, Dorff points to numerous calls within the Talmud and the Midrash that call for kindness, for charity, for justice, for care of others. He emphasizes how central these values are to the Jewish tradition. As an example, he quotes from an important text, Ethics of the Fathers, which says, "The world depends on 3 things: on Torah, on worship, and on acts of loving kindness." But why care about Tikkun Olam? After asking this question, Dorff lays out multiple reasons. First, among the religious reasons, is the belief in the sovereignty of God as the creator and thus the owner of the world, who has commanded us to do this work. However, even Dorff admits that being told to do so will not be a sufficient reason for those who are atheists, as well as for those who point to examples where God's own actions can raise moral questions. So as another reason for caring about Tikkun Olam, Dorff points to the precept that humanity is created in the image of God, and thus each person is worthy of dignity and of respect and of care. While Dorff grounds his claim in theological ideas of creation, Many an atheistic humanist still shares this value and the related ethic of caring for others. It's the first UU principle of respecting the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Imagining still more reasons to care about Tikkun Olam, Dorff then enters into an interesting discussion about community and individualism. He argues that post-Enlightenment, most Western people, including Jews, understand individuals to be, quote, independent agents who may or may not choose to associate themselves with others for specific reasons, end quote. In other words, joining a group is an individual's choice. And even when people choose to not join a group, even when people choose to join a group, Dorff notes that Americans retain their fundamental identity as individuals. So you might be in a group, but you're still thinking about yourself as the individual first. According to Dorff, this view is very different from earlier ways of thinking, when group membership was often understood to be, quote, a metaphysical fact over which people had no control, end quote. Rather than choosing to belong, you simply did. For Dorff, this organic, metaphysical connection as a Jewish people means that each individual in the group is responsible for every other simply by being part of the Jewish people. Tikkun Olam, then, is not so much a choice an individual makes as a responsibility born of the nature of relationship one has to others. This brings us to the second debate within the Jewish community over Tikkun Olam. While progressive Jewish voices have expanded the sense of duty to follow Tikkun Olam to a wide understanding of the world, others argue that the duty stops with other Jewish people. As one blog summarizes this concern, if the main thing to being Jewish is fixing an environmentally damaged planet and assisting broken and desperate people wherever in the world they live, why should anyone care over Jewish ritual, Jewish community, or building a Jewish family? Despite summarizing this concern, the blog authors Zev Freeman and Yaakov Ort argue that this depiction of the problem reflects a too shallow understanding of Tikkun Olam. And their understanding, tikkun means improving. So you don't have to go all the way to fixing the world, you can just improve it. Kind of like the little boy in Kate's story. He made the world a little better for that one man. And Olam, they suggest, is related to the Jewish idea of God being concealed within the world. They write, problem is, when God hides, people assume the position is up for grabs. Every man can think he is God, and if he is God, he can do as he pleases. And that is the source of all injustice and suffering, end quote. And their understanding then, Tikkun Olam, means unrooting this concealment, finding God, through the joy of discovering the beauty, wonder, and mystery of the divine goodness in the world. God is hidden so that we might have an active role in improving the world. Or as Freeman and Ort explain, quote, God is not silent because the world does not matter to him. God is simply making room for us so that we might have a part in improving God's world. What I find meaningful in this discussion of Tikkun Olam is not only that we each have a role to play in improving the world, but also that our responsibility to do this work emerges from our relationship to one another and to the world. While we definitely do not all agree on concepts of God or of creation within this congregation, Within the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we do speak of both the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. These remind me of Dorff's understanding of an organic community that simply is connected and responsible for one another. Could it be that we are not just individuals choosing to act charitably, but that we have a duty to care for one another by virtue of being part of the same group of people living on the same planet? Thinking along these same lines, environmental anthropologist Keith Tidball connects Mr. Rogers' idea of neighborhood to ideas of land ethic. What if our land ethic, our sense of neighborhood, expanded? What if, as Aldo Leopold writes, we expanded, quote, the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, animals, or collectively the land? In short, a land ethic changes the role of Homo sapiens from conqueror of the land community to plain member and citizen of it. It implies respect for one's fellow members and also respect for the community as such. What if we understood ourselves first as members of an ecosystem to whom we have a responsibility prior to who we are as an individual? And what if we imagined these relationships of connections to others, to the land, to the planet, as the ground of our being, our metaphysical truth, and perhaps even the presence of the divine within the world and within each of us? Such philosophical and theological questions are attempts to answer why care about Tikkun Olam, about it repairing or improving the world, about engaging in social action. There is so much broken all around us that we can get tired. We may even start to wonder if we might just choose to opt out. But perhaps we do not have that choice. Perhaps by the nature of our relationship to one another and to the world, being part of repairing, improving, and healing the world is just part of what it means to belong to the world, to the human community, to this planet. And perhaps we might even find beauty, wonder, and the joy of the divine in the world as we do. Sometimes it's hard, though, oftentimes. But perhaps like Fred Rogers did in the deep shadows of 9/11, we might reach for the wisdom of spiritual traditions to help us find a way forward. Perhaps, as Rogers said, no matter what our particular job, especially in our world today, we are called to be Tikkun Olam, repairers of creation. And with Rogers, may we also add, thank you for whatever you do, wherever you are, to bring joy and light and hope and faith and pardon and love to your neighborhood and to yourself. May it be so. Amen.